Not every computer needs to be a gaming computer. A lot of the times you need a fast and responsive general use computer. And I happen to have a brother who asked me to put him together a general use computer, something fast, something good. Let me show you what I chose and how to put it together. Around the time my brother asked me to build him a computer, Gamdias happened to reach out and they sent over their Talos E1 case as well as their 650 watt power supply. This is an RGB power supply from them. It's the P1 650 watt. And that's going to look really nice in there. So one thing real quick about my brother, he likes his stuff to look good as well as be fast. And this build is going to reflect that a little bit. The graphics card we're going with, because this is a non-gaming machine, even though it is a capable graphics card, is an MSI Radeon RX 560. And this has a custom backplate from V1 Tech. And this is my brother's company. So I got a whole nice little setup going on here for him. We're also going to be using easy DIY sleeved cables. I've got a Cooler Master Air G100L, the UFO cooler going on to cool this. Crucial Ballistics DDR3 8GB stick of RAM, because a general use computer doesn't need a whole ton of RAM. And the motherboard that's going with that is the MSI H81M E3-1230v3. So everything in here is going to run very quick, especially with an SSD. This is a 128 gig SSD. Again, this is just general use stuff. It doesn't need a whole ton of storage, it doesn't need a whole ton of RAM, and it doesn't need a whole ton of GPU power to get its job done well. And can't forget the processor. This is an i7-4770 and 4 cores, 8 threads. I believe it goes to maybe 3.8 or 3.9 gigahertz turbo. This is a powerful processor still, even by today's standards. And for general use, it's maybe a little bit overkill, but it's definitely gonna run everything fast, which is the point. So you might be wondering why I went with parts like these. Well, in my way of thinking, when it comes to building computers for general use, a lot of the time somebody is going to grow with the computer. So starting off with something that's already underpowered because you think that might be good for general use. And I'm talking going with like a dual core processor, maybe 4 gigs of RAM and a regular spinning hard drive or something like that, integrated graphics, you're gonna hit the limits of that real quick if it's something you do end up growing with, or as websites and programs online tend to get more and more system intensive, they will run out of steam quick. So to overshoot things a little bit with a slightly more powerful GPU and a slightly more powerful processor will provide long-term usage of the computer, ensuring that you're going to be happy with the system for a longer period of time. But it's still going to look damn good doing what it does. If you find this video informative or entertaining, consider subscribing and hit that like button. All right, let's get to it. So getting into the build process, installing the CPU to the motherboard, usual, just drop it in there, slots in, not a big deal at all. Installing the RAM with this cooler specifically is actually very good because this RAM is low profile. So installing the RAM, again, clicking it in, not a big deal. This is just going to be a general use system, so single channel, dual channel, not that big of a deal. And thus the 8GB stick and 1 DIMM. So installing the UFO spaceship CPU cooler. Generally, the last time I did this, it was a pain, but I had a lot easier of a time installing it this time around. I guess practice makes perfect. Here's the problem with a CPU cooler that sort of hangs down as far as this one does, with the PCI 16 slot so high up on this micro-ATX motherboard. The V1 Tech backplate for the GPU didn't fit. It would stick up too high and interfere with the edges of the UFO CPU cooler, and thus I had to figure out somewhere else to put it, but we'll get to that. I had to make sure you install the I/O shield too. So when it comes to installing a motherboard, in any case, and make sure you get the I/O shield installed first. Now, a lot of new motherboards, especially the higher end ones, have the I/O shield already integrated, so that's nice. And if you forget with those, obviously it's not a big deal because it's already in there. Installing the motherboard just drops in, making sure all the standoffs line up. Not a problem. Got all the standoffs line up according to micro-ATX on this motherboard. Screwed it all in. Good to go. Now, installing the power supply is definitely an interesting point here because it's an RGB power supply. It has that illuminated ring fan built into it. However, in this case, you want the fan to point up so the ring light can actually be seen, but the method of mounting the power supply is facing down. And the hole that's down there is not all that big to get an underlighting effect. You still get some light coming out the side of the power supply enclosure, so that's nice. But yeah, this is kind of a problem with RGB power supplies, especially ones that get tucked away in a shroud. At least you get a little light out of this one because it's not under a shroud. And so figuring out a new spot for the V1 Tech plate was actually pretty easy because the hard drive cage lent itself perfectly well to just dropping it on there. It was metal, the magnets that installed onto it were already ready to go, snapped into place, just routed the wires out there. It's a pretty good spot for it, and overall I think that happened to work out just fine despite not being able to use it on the back of the graphics card. Now this is where getting into a small case becomes kind of an issue: wire management. If you're using a lot of power supply extensions, like sleeved extensions like the blue one and this one from Easy DIY Fab, or just have a power supply that uses a lot of modular cables that are very long, and you have a small case like this one that doesn't have a lot of space in the back of it, well, you're gonna have a lot of trouble getting everything flattened out. So zip ties actually were not able to be used here because they would make you unable to flatten everything down, and that was a problem, obviously. So flattening everything down without the zip ties and then getting Wayne to help me push down on the back of the panel to seal it all up was key to getting everything all nice and buttoned up on this case. So that's the only complaint really with this case. It's really easy to work on, but the flattening of the cables, not a lot of space for wire management, that was a bit of a problem. All right, and so the build is complete. Real quick though, if you guys want to see benchmarks on what this actual GPU is capable of with a similar powered CPU, that'll be linked right up here. We do have full benchmarks run on this RX 560, so make sure you check that video out. So Gamdias sent over this case. Thank you, Gamdias, for the case and the power supply. But I gotta say that the front choice with the fans and no grate or anything like that is kind of an interesting choice, to put it that way. It's definitely a design choice, but if you got curious ones, little ones, furry ones that may try to get into that front section, their fingers or whatever can get caught in the fan blades, and that could be a risk. So it's definitely not a computer I would keep on the ground or low where it's more accessible. Put it up on the desks. It's small enough. It doesn't take up a lot of space, which is nice. So it's good to keep something like this higher up. Something else to mention is that the CPU cooler on this one, this UFO cooler is super cool looking in my opinion, but it can cause problems. Obviously we weren't able to use the V1 Tech plate in the back of the graphics card, but now that I'm looking at it from this angle, we also couldn't put an exhaust fan into this case because it also reaches basically to the grate on this side. So these CPU coolers, stuff like this, you know, they have their drawbacks sometimes too. So if you guys ended up going with a micro-ATX build like this Gamdias Talos E1, what would you guys do with it? What kind of parts would you put in it? Would you go full custom water cooling? That'd be cool in a small case like this, wouldn't it? Or maybe you've already done a build like this. Drop a link or comment down below if you already have an awesome micro-ATX build, or if you just want to talk about what you would put in a case like this. We also have a Discord where you can post photos of those builds or ask questions about how to configure a build like this. And we got plenty of people to talk tech there. So all links will be down in the description below. Join up and let's talk some tech. So one more time, thank you to Gamdias for sending over the case and the power supply. Make sure you check them out. All links will be down in the description below. So I don't actually do too many compact builds in micro-ATX cases, so it's really cool that I got to work with this one. I think it came out really good looking. It's a simple build, but it's definitely something that is as much go as it is show. The RGB implementation is nice. It looks good through the front of the case. Through power supply, because it's not in a shroud, at least some of it comes through. The GPU backplate that's mounted over here adds some look to it too. The way that the CPU cooler is just facing out and lights up with the tempered glass. One of my favorite things about this, speaking of that tempered glass, is that it opens like that. I love that it's a hinged door, and that's just something that is overseen by a lot of the more affordable cases that usually use the 4 screws. I gotta say that's one of my favorite features of this case, hands down. You got the mesh in the top, the normal plugs, normal connections. I mean, overall, I think this case came out great. This build came out great, and my brother, I hope that he ends up liking it. If you guys like this video, click that thumbs up button, click that subscribe button. We always got more coming. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, join our Discord. All links will be down in the description below. And if you want to check out more on this, again, everything's down below. Go ahead and check it out.